Welcome to Sci-Fi Book Trek. Today we'll be giving our review on Richard Bachman or Stephen King, The Running Man.
Somebody told me that his name was Bill. Did you run? Did you run?
This book was of course written by Stephen King under his pseudonym Richard Bachman. Now, at the time this was published, no one knew it was his pseudonym, and it was only 2 years later that it finally came out. Now, this book was done in 1982, and during that time, Stephen King was in the middle of his drugs and alcoholic phase at this point, and as a result, this book only took a week to write. And maybe cocaine didn't have anything to do with it. Maybe it did. Who knows? And now on to talk about the author in a bit more detail.
So, Richard Bachman, A.K.A. Stephen Edwin King, born September 21st, 1947 in Portland, Maine, to a father who was a traveling vacuum salesman and a mother who was a caregiver. He started writing when he was 6 or 7 by copying panels out of comic books and generating his own stories from those still images. At 8 years old, he would discover an H.P. Lovecraft collection in his father's belongings, which set him on the path to becoming the King of Horror. He would then go on to study English at the University of Maine, graduating in the year 1970. He sold his first story prior to graduation, The Glass Floor, to Startling Mystery Stories in 1967. Being unable to find a teaching post straight out of university, he would continue to sell short stories to earn his keep until 1971, where he took on a post at Hampton Academy. While King is known primarily for his work in the horror genre, there's multiple standout works that he has done outside of this bracket, not least of which is Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, which would of course go on to be adapted into an award-winning film. Our book today, The Running Man, would also be adapted into a film, with markedly less success.
But I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine! Ah!
King is of course still alive and kicking at the time of filming this video and tends to spend his time posting on Twitter. The Running Man was published in 1982, which brings us on to our publication year. So, publication year of 1982.
Yes. Now, I'll tell you what, I'll go first.
See how many we've copied.
Well, I don't know, for this one, I went English like I normally do. This was the year Channel 4 was first launched.
Oh, okay.
And the first ever programme, Countdown.
I remember the old Channel 4 logo.
Have you got one?
Yes, mine. The first ever computer virus was identified. The Elk Cloner. It was a boot sector virus which infected Apple computers.
Yeah.
So when people tell you that Apple computers don't get viruses, the first computer virus ever identified was on an Apple. But yes, it was also spread by floppy disk, which is another anachronism that a whole load of people are not going to get. Why have you 3D printed the save button? Yeah.
My next one would be Matt Smith was born this year, of Doctor Who fame, and House of Dragons is the latest one he's on.
He did surprisingly well in that, I think. Yeah.
Hello. I'm the Doctor. He can keep his tongue.
My next one, the Helsinki Metro opens this year. Finland's first rapid transit system.
Ei siihen et koske, saatana vie.
Yes, that's an interesting infrastructure project. But yes. Anyway, on a more cultural note, we'll go on to films and video games. So, what's your first video game?
My first video game, weirdly enough, is a small, lesser-known game called Video Trek 88. It's a Star Trek-based game that has the Enterprise being piloted around by the player on a giant galactic map. And I just thought, it matches up the channel title, so it's like, I've got to pick it.
Well, for the first film I've got, also similar idea, Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan. Came out with shit. Lovely little movie. Have you got another game or?
Rather famous one. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The
Yeah.
Atari game that crashed the video game market.
Well, I mean, also the film came out this year. However, I didn't pick it. I picked Tron. We'll end it there and go on to the review itself.
It's a dystopian science fiction thriller set in 2025 and told entirely from the perspective of our titular running man, Ben Richards.
It's set in, a dystopian United States where the government and the network, like the TV company, are the same thing. And the network is meant to put on shows to entertain the public, and they find the best way to entertain is through more sort of gladiatorial, violent blood sports rather than, anything useful.
So our protagonist is one of the down-on-his-luck characters. His life's in shambles, and his daughter is mortally sick from flu. And he resolves to join the games to try and secure some cash to essentially put them up for life. And he ends up winding up as the contestant on one of the most popular shows, which is The Running Man.
And that's the basically initial setup.
It is told entirely from Richard's perspective. You get to know his inner thoughts, you get to know exactly what is driving him, exactly what is motivating him. And yeah, the energy behind his motivations, it doesn't seem like any of the problems that he has found himself in are his fault. I mean, he's by no means a dumb character. This is not a character who is down on his luck because he's stupid or because he's, shiftless or a layabout. He has done work, but he's ended up being blackballed by work, essentially, because he has principles.
Yeah.
And his principles basically bring him at odds with the ruling class. And that is interesting. The fact that he isn't stupid, the fact that he isn't similar to some of his fellow contestants who do kind of seem like they are the dumb people that the network characterized them to be. Whereas Richards himself, yes, he's angry, but he's got very justifiable reasons for being that angry character.
Yeah. But he also feels like he doesn't know how to channel that anger or bottle it when appropriate.
Which has gotten him into trouble.
Yes. I mean, it is interesting to see how you know, the network as it is, it's, you know, different class structures against each other.
Mm. The social stratification is very much a case of you aren't getting out of that lower class. The only way out of lower class is
to die.
Yeah.
One way or another. But yeah, it does feel like that. And also, one thing I would say is racism is alive and well within this book.
As well as homophobia.
Yeah, there's homophobic, racist, sexist, and there's, I think, one anti-Semitic slur as well. Just thrown in. It feels sort of like it's part of a society and no one takes it seriously to a point. And it feels like sometimes the slurs are there just to shock.
You know, in this day and age, a language is very problematic, but it's understandable. I think it's there for setting building and to drive home that definite feeling of this is a them and us. We are in this position because TV has told us this.
I don't think it needs to be there fully, and I don't think it plays a big role in the society. Because how some things are set up, it feels more like a class war than anything else.
Mm.
And most of the people bandy about slurs so much, it feels like they've lost any real bite, apart from when it's coming to a higher class person and they're shocked by it.
So swear words are most effective if they're not overused. Their power comes from the taboo we put on them.
I would say, though, I kept reading this, I wouldn't say it was a fully entertaining book in sort of a mild entertainment way. It has a story. It's very brutal in places. It's, I wouldn't say very dystopian, but it's like dystopian to some points. It is a bit of a grueling experience at times. And there's times where, it could trigger claustrophobia. I won't go into spoilers, but I was like, okay. I sort of know that feeling. Don't like it. But yeah, it was just, after it, I kept on thinking, well, during it, I kept on thinking, Richard just seems overly paranoid.
Mm.
Constant. And the initial part where he's walking through, like, where he lives, he doesn't come across as a paranoid person. When he's part of the games, he feels overly paranoid. And sometimes you find out he has rights to be paranoid. Sometimes, it works out. Maybe not.
Considering the stakes.
But yeah, I was also thinking, like, especially after I found out when this book was written, it was like, has this got more to do with maybe a drug habit?
Well,
going into, like, breathing it into this character, or something else? Because it did feel like he was overly paranoid at certain points.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
By the end of it, I'm in two minds whether I'm glad to have read it or not. But I couldn't say I found it, like, happily entertaining. In that sort of way. But for me, this felt like a sort of adolescent or teenager in the middle of a deserted inner city at night, like full on past midnight, no one else is around, and they're just screaming, not for help, not for anything else, just an angry primal scream. That was the impression I got from most of the book. It felt like a primal adolescent scream.
I mean, just briefly as well, how did you feel about the ending?
The ending I thought was a natural conclusion, and I kind of had the idea that it was going there. We shall go on to
recommendations.
Yes. Now, would you recommend this book?
I would highly recommend this book.
I mean, how so? Or why?
I was gripped the whole way through, and the setting is rough. The setting is very, very hard, and like
bleak.
I said, yeah, I'm not one of those people in for sort of depression porn, or it was kind of believable. Like I say, the language elements and some of the, the them and us ideas of what he was putting across, that came across to me quite heavily. The fact that we could hear all of Richard's mind, we could hear everything that was going on in his head. It's all done from his perspective, and it creates that sort of drama and tension that I really, really found I was going along with. I was really quite finding myself getting wrapped up in Richard's struggle and all of his feelings as things were going on. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed reading it. And I would definitely give this across to someone and say, yeah, read this. How did you find it?
I would recommend it. Probably not a high recommend. I did like how, it did show sort of the wealthy versus the poor, how, like, the clash between them, and how, like, the government sets up each against their own. And also I did like how things they have to go through just to get on the show. I didn't fully explain everything, but overall it was perfectly fine. It showed you this world, it explained this world, and it showed you mostly all the downs of it. Not very much ups.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So, of course, guys, this is still very much available. I actually bought the Kindle version for this review, which was actually quite cheap, considering. And, of course, you can get new paperbacks and secondhand still from most book retailers.
Yep.
Okay.
Right, then. And with that, we'll put up our spoiler talk of this book next week. And the week after, we might have a interesting video to put up for you. And then after that, normal service shall resume. Eventually after Christmas.
Are we going to take a break over Christmas? Depends how much content we get prepared, I suppose.
It depends if our editor can pull his finger out. And with that, bye.
Bye. I figured leaving Maine until later.
Well, no. Like, he starts his long love affair with bloody fucking Maine.
Yes. Between him and Angela Lansbury, I think Maine is basically the murder capital of the world.